Derek Fisher is the author of the Application Security Handbook. He's a university instructor at Temple University where he teaches software development security to undergrad and graduate students. He's a speaker on topics in the cybersecurity space and has led security teams, large and small, at organizations in the healthcare and financial industries. Derek joins us to unpack the goals of an application security program, what is cutting edge in AppSec programs today, the role of open source versus commercial, and guidance on topics such as decentralized application security, enablement instead of gates, and stop chasing the shiny new tool. We hope you enjoy this conversation with Derek Fisher.
How do you create security champions? Security Journey brings together two powerful approaches to provide application security education to help developers become security champions and produce safer applications. Security Journey training content extends beyond developers to reach the entire SDLC, creating a security-first organization. Learn more about our enterprise security training at securityjourney.com.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Application Security Podcast. My name is Robert Hurlbut, and I am a Principal Application Security Architect at Acquia, as well as focused on threat modeling. And I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Romeo. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Robert. Chris Romeo, CEO at Curve Ventures, and I can't think of anything else more creative to say today, so I'm gonna leave it there.
All right. And today we're going to be, of course, talking about application security again. We have our special guest today, Derek Fisher. Welcome, Derek, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to have some good conversation here.
Excellent. And I know you just wrote a book, or just got published, and I have a copy of it. Chris has as well, and we've been looking at it on Application Security Program Handbook. Fantastic book. But we want to, first, before we dive into some questions about application security and programs and so forth, I wanted to check in with you. What is your security origin story?
Yeah, so I've been in engineering for I guess going on 30 years now. I started out in hardware engineering a long time ago, and eventually got into software. And when I was in software engineering and development, I had the opportunity to partner up with one of our leading security individuals in the organization I was in. They were the chief product security officer, and was able to really kind of be mentored by him, and I caught the bug. I felt that it was obviously a very interesting space. That's why those of us that are in it are in it. I think it's interesting. There's always something new. There's always a new challenge. And so I felt that was, it made sense for me to pursue that. I enjoyed the challenge, the ever-changing landscape. It's not undifferent from just general engineering in the sense that there's always something new going on. There's always new challenges to try to solve. But I think security has a little bit more of a there's more at stake, right? I think we all understand that. There's a lot of challenges that have very big implications for people, not just their data and their livelihoods, but in some cases, depending on the industry you're in, there's real life consequences for some of the decisions that we make in security and engineering. So for me, I think that also added an additional facet of challenge to it. So I went off and pursued a cybersecurity degree, a graduate degree from Boston University, got several certifications, and have been in it for going on about 10 years now. So haven't looked back and enjoyed every moment of it. So.
And Derek, you mentioned in our previous conversation, getting ready for this, that you're doing some teaching at Temple University, and so I'm curious. What are you taking away from that? What have you learned about the next generation of software engineers from that experience?
Yeah, it's I remember the way it got started there is kind of interesting. I partnered with a coworker and friend of mine that was teaching at Temple University as a QA. He was teaching a QA class, and he said, "Hey, maybe once a semester, why don't you come in and just take half the class and talk about security?" And so because in fact I have these conversations today that QA is not much different than what we do from a security perspective. Instead of doing quality assurance, we're doing security assurance. So it was a nice partnership there between the two of us. And so I did that for a few semesters with him, and eventually got introduced to the head of the technology department there, and we started having conversations about starting a class there. And I remember the guy that got me in there, and that it was the QA teacher. He said, "Nobody's ever going to sign up for that class. It's like, it's boring. Nobody's going to sign up for that class." And it's been over capacity every single semester since I started teaching it, to the point now where I'm now teaching 2 sections per semester, and both of them are over capacity with a wait list. And I'm fending off requests to join the class consistently every single semester. So I think that there's one or two takeaways from this. The more comical takeaway that I usually hear from other people is that it's because it's an easy class and it's an easy A, and everyone wants to go do it because they know they're going to be able to get through it without too much trouble. The way I prefer to look at it is that I think that there's a real genuine desire for engineers to have this under their belt. So the students that join my course are not just software engineers, but they're also IT specialists. So it's a mix of CIS and CS. And so I think that's beneficial in the sense that we're getting more technologists, whether they're developers or they're engineers or IT specialists or system admins. They're getting an appreciation of security. And that's one of the things that we often fight in this space, is that we want to make sure that we're not the only ones that know security. When everyone knows security and when everyone has a stake in security, then we're going to be a more secure organization. So I think seeing the enthusiasm to join the class is great. Now, of course, most students, it's an elective course at Temple, so nobody's really necessarily required. I hope that changes, as we kind of go forward, just at the education level, that we do make this required, not just at the college level, but even at the high school level, that we start making these types of classes more required. But it's good to see the enthusiasm for it and seeing people wanting to learn about this. But in the course, you could definitely see that there's some people that have some real security chops, like somebody that really, this is what they want to do. And I've actually, on my team, I've hired 2 of them out of Temple onto my team that they report to me today. So there's some people that are definitely wanting to do this as a career, and they see the benefits of that. And I think that's good. For those that are not, going off to become security, weenies, down the road, and their goal is just to understand more about security, then that's great too. I consider that that's, a job well done. So, and I often tell the students, at the end of the semester, like, hey, like, if this is going to set you apart, right? You look at all the university graduates that graduate with a CS degree or CIS degree. I'm not throwing shade here, but I mean, you're going to be in the mix with a lot of other people with very, very similar skills. And having this type of background and this type of interest will set you apart from an employer standpoint, even if you're not going into security. Even if you just say, hey, like I understand how security gets integrated into applications, development, that will set you apart. So I think it's been good to see that. Yeah,
and it's exciting that you're seeing that demand as well, because I mean, we can argue about how many open cybersecurity roles, and I don't know that I trust the numbers that get thrown around. There's,
Right.
750,000 unfilled jobs, or that
Right.
seems a little bit excessive. But
Right.
we know anybody that works in this industry, we know we need more people to enter this industry. We know we're short. Like, we can all agree that. And it's good to hear that there's some enthusiasm now as people are looking at this. And that's just a positive thing for the future, that we're going to have more people coming into this. Now, if we can just figure out how to create an entry-level role in security, like every time I look at this, like, oh, entry-level, 3 to 5 years experience. Oh, hold on a second now.
That's not entry level.
Rewind the tape here. That's not entry level. If you have to have 3 to 5 years experience, that's a mid-level role. Like, call it what it is, and that's a whole other tangent. I know we're here to talk about AppSec programs, so that's a whole other tangent. So I better circle us back, towards towards what we're here to talk about. So I always ask this question of all of our authors, and I forgot to tell you in advance, but why write this book now? Like, what drove you to? Because I know writing books is a labor of love. From everybody's told me it takes far more hours than anyone will ever know. But why this book, and why now?
So it's kind of interesting because I had thought about writing this book for a while, probably a year before I was approached by Manning. I had started thinking about, in fact, I have notes to prove it, that I had started jotting down stuff saying like, it'd be great if there was an AppSec like desk reference or something like that. And so I had started kind of thinking about it for a while. Manning had just happened to reach out to me and say, hey, have you thought about writing a book on application security? It's like, yeah, actually I have. And so, and this is the way that I've described it is, we're all, those of us that are in space, we know that there's plenty of material out there. OWASP is a prime example of, where you can go get a wealth of knowledge on web application security. What I think has been missing in the industry is, and again, this is just because I haven't necessarily seen it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I apologize if it is out there and I just missed it. But what I've kind of haven't seen is, what do you do if you are the leader of a application security function, or if not even a leader, but you've been put in charge of developing an application security program within an organization? Where do you start? I think we could all probably answer that question mentally in our heads and walk through it and say, well, we're going to start by, doing risk analysis, gap analysis, and then we're going to start talking about, what's our budget and figure out what we can, roll out. But I think, having something that's been tried and tested and say, okay, here is an experience of, somebody that's going through this. And here's what, has worked, and here's what doesn't work, and here's why these things, are important. I think that to me was kind of missing, because, you look at OWASP and it's very, and absolutely not, discrediting anything OWASP does. I mean, it's absolutely 100% important, and I utilize it every day. But it's here's how here's tools, here's maturity models, here's threat model, threat dragon, here's the top 10. But you still need to piece all that together, right? You still need to understand, like, okay, well, here's where I integrate this, here's where I integrate that, and that part I think has been somewhat missing. So
yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I did a talk back at OWASP, the Global OWASP in London, maybe 5 years ago. And I just went and stitched together like 10 OWASP projects and did a talk on how you could make a program using these things. But the stitching together didn't exist. There was no, I didn't go to a project and say, here's how I bring them together. I stitched them together kind of based on my experience. And so, yeah, totally agree with you. Like, OWASP is an excellent resource. We love OWASP, but part of what OWASP is missing is the glue amongst all of those different things.
Right. Yeah. And earlier you mentioned about, it's a labor of love. I get asked that question as well. Like, would you ever write another one? It's like, I don't know. Man, that was, and I remember when Manning approached me and I said, yeah, I could probably do it in 9 months, and get it out the door. And I think after a few days of just really kind of plotting it out, I was like, there's no way I'm going to do this in 9 months. So I went back and said, yeah, it's going to be a year. And that was even close. So it's painstaking.
Yeah.
It's very painstaking.
Yeah, but I think there is value though, right? Like you've created something now, and to your point, there's just not a lot of guidance out there because when I hear a lot of people, this is still a common thing that I hear. Somebody gets hired on, and this person is now, you're going to build an AppSec program. Like literally, they're a single person team, and they're given that charter. And our industry, it's crazy to think our industry of AppSec has existed for 20 plus years, but there are still the bulk of organizations are saying, you are going to build an AppSec program by yourself.
Right.
And that person's sitting there going, okay, SAST.
Right. Yep.
Like these are so they need that. So this is definitely, so what you've written is definitely needed. Like there's a need in our industry. And so let's transition now into kind of diving into AppSec programs. And, when you think at a high level, what is the goal of the AppSec program? What are we trying to achieve with this thing?
It comes down to balancing risk against the business. And so, the business still needs to deliver value to the customers, right? And application security's position in that is to ensure that goes out the door with as few risks as possible, right? And that is what the boiled down strategy is, for application security, at least in my mind. And me, I've been in engineering. I understand maybe to a fault that there's things have to get out the door. Like you can't be, and we all know this in the security space, like you can't be the team of no. And we also can't be the team of, here's a scan report that we ran, totally unfiltered, slap it in somebody's face and tell them to go fix it. So I think we, as an application security team, our job and our goals should be to ensure that, that the application goes out not with no risk, but with identified measured risk that we can either assign. If we're going out the door with risk, we acknowledge that there's risk. It has to be assigned. We have protection mechanisms in place to hopefully stop any exploitation. But the bottom line is value needs to go out to the customer. We need to be able to enable that value to go out the door with as little risk as possible.
With that in mind, in thinking about application programs today, is there anything that you would consider to be cutting edge?
I'll be boring. So, because I think, and I believe I mentioned this in my book, but I know I've talked about this before. It's like, with when we look at our peer teams in security, like you look at like network security and operation security and cloud security, there's a lot of cutting edge stuff out there, right? There's especially when buzzwords, AI, ML, there's a lot of stuff out there that we can leverage. I think, when it comes down to application security, it's blocking and tackling that I think we're missing. Things like, the basics like visibility, knowing what it is that we have. I think there's some cool stuff when it comes to CI/CD security, in the sense that, not just security in the pipeline, but security of the pipeline. I think, there's some cool stuff that's being done there. But one of the biggest challenges with development and application security is that if you're in an organization that is of any reasonable size, there's no standard. Nobody, not your entire shop is not designing software on C# running an IIS on-prem. It's going to be a mixture of multi-cloud. You're going to have Java, you're going to have Node, you're going to have C#, you're going to have, all these different languages. You're going to have multiple types of CIs. You're going to have multiple types of CDs. And so it's not as easy for us, and I'm not doing the woe is, AppSec type thing, but, it's not as easy for us to say, all right, we're going to deploy this, EDR solution, and it's going to work across the board because we know that it's either Linux or Windows that's running, and we're going to be able to, manage this easily. For us in AppSec, it's a little more challenging. But I think, when you look at some of the good work that's being done today, I think, you look to the, security of the CI/CD. There's a lot of where at least I'm putting my focus today is, trying to really dive deep on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I think about, across the innovation we've seen in AppSec in the last couple of years, I'm still willing to put RASP in that bucket of cutting edge. And I know it seems odd to put something that was announced and released like 3 or 4 years ago in the cutting edge bucket, but RASP is still relatively untapped from what I see. And I've been a user of it for 4 or 5 years since it first came out because I saw it, and being someone who loves AppSec, and I'm like, wow, that is the first piece of tech that can legitimately say we don't have false positives. Because if they can see it, there's no. So what are your thoughts on that, Derek?
Yeah, definitely. And there's so to your point, I mean, it's been around for a little bit, right? So, but again, it gets down to protection. So I think when we look at anything that's able to detect and prevent something in real time, absolutely, that's because, again, we know that this is the challenge between AppSec and our peers, is that if you have an operating system vulnerability, you can blast a patch out across thousands of hosts within a short period, not a short period of time, but you know what I mean. You can do that rather quickly. With development, it's a little different. You need that runtime protection because you may have a long lead time to get a patch out. So you need, or to get that software, remediated, and you're going to need that virtual patching, whether it's through something like a RASP or a WAF or, some other type of tool. But I think RASP is something that has been has not been tapped as much as it should be, because, in some cases, we relied heavily on something like a WAF, that's going to get us, some level of application layer protection, but it's not going to give us that intelligence that RASP does.
Yeah, and I think part of the challenge is there really hasn't been an open source player in the world of RASP, and I remember a conversation I had with the project lead for the mod security rule set, the core rule set from OWASP, Christian Fellini. Had a conversation with him years and years ago, and I asked him that question. I said, what about a RASP that came out of mod security and the core rule set kind of, and they had dreams of it, but it's just one of those things that's never come to fruition, probably because it's a lot more complicated than originally thought of, from an open source perspective. But brings me to this question. Derek, I want to get your take on, what is the role of open source versus commercial software in the AppSec program?
So, I'm of the camp where you should be using both. I think it depends on where in like the pipeline that you're leveraging them. I think open source, and I'm desperately trying to not use the word shift left, because I know that we're, as a AppSec, we're trying to, like, shouldn't just be shift left. We should be shift, all that other stuff. But anyway, but I think, as you look at the, our traditional method of, shifting left, I think open source tools should play a bigger role far left. Right. So if you are, a developer in your IDE, if you can integrate open source tools to try to detect, whether it's whether you're running a SAST or you're running some type of open source scanner like dependency check or something like that, and if you have the ability to run maybe some container image scanning open source, tools, like there's where you should be running those open source tools at that, on the left hand side. As you get closer to production, that's where I think you need your I'll say the heavier hitting tools that are commercial off the shelf, that provides you a little bit more assurance that you're getting your money's worth. So I think there is benefits to running both. What I would caution, though, and this is something that I even struggle with myself, is that do we need yet another tool? Because now you're in a space where you have to manage multiple tools. You need expertise in those tools. You need to be able to pull that data and aggregate it and dashboard it, all that other good stuff. That can further complicate things. But if you're using an open source tool, you give it to put it in the hands of the developers and say, hey, if you run these locally, or at least pre-commit, and can get a sense of your vulnerabilities and hopefully resolve them before you issue a merge or pull request, then that gets us something, right? And maybe that's something that the AppSec team doesn't have to be responsible for, only making sure that that the developers have access to it and are utilizing it correctly.
Yeah, it kind of brings you to more of a culture of security, where developers are using the open source tools, not because it's mandated, not because there's some governance that's happening to say, did you run that scanner? It's because they're catching the value proposition of, if I run this tool before I check the code in, the commercial tools find less things that I have to then go back and issue rework and work my way through. And so I'm going to jump a little bit out of order here, just because you mentioned, you kind of teased out this, one of the things I pulled out from the book, this idea of stop chasing the shiny new tool. So I thought, let's talk about that a little more depth now, because you teased it in that last conversation. So when you say stop chasing the shiny new tool, like why give that guidance to those that are running programs?
I think, and maybe it's just been my experience, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not the only one. But it's we as an industry, and it's not a security, unique to security. I think it's just we are so enamored by the new hotness that comes out, and it's like, oh well, that and vendors are trained to do that, right? That's what they do. They want to sell you the new thing and push and drive a new tool into the hands of the the experts. And so I think the point of that, not chasing that that new tool, is that remember what you have, and remember what value those tools provide. So just as an example, I mean, a lot of the COTS tools that we use within our organizations often have capabilities that extend beyond the way we're using them. So if we're running a DAS tool, chances are there's an SCA component of that, or there may be even SaaS components of that. So and it may not be doing it as well as buying a special purpose tool specifically for that type of scanning. However, is it really worth dropping, depending on the size of your organization, another $100,000 to bring in a tool to staff up to manage that, when instead you can just switch on something in a tool that you currently already own, that you already have feeds for reports, you already have expertise in the organization for, which one's easier? So I think some of it is realizing what you currently have and utilizing that as much as possible. And also there's that early adopter mindset too, where sometimes being the first to use the brand new tool isn't always the best thing. You're now the guinea pig, and I've been in situations where we've in some of the organizations I've worked in, where we brought in a new tool and we were the guinea pigs, and it's like you ask for like basic features and you're like, why is this tool not do this? And the vendor will come back and say, oh, we're working on it. It's like, well, wait a minute, this should be basics, and so that could also be a challenge. So
yeah, I think about, you mentioned earlier, the DR space, the EDR, MDR, XDR. Let's just make up a new one. JDR. Did you hear about the
Yep.
new JDR tool?
No,
Like
I have not.
it's joyous detection and response. The thing, it sings a happy song when it finds something. Like that's a space. Like I swear, like I spend so much time in AppSec, but like there's a like I probably couldn't do an explanation of all the DR style tools. Like,
Right.
what's the difference? Like, I don't know. There's like, it just seems like people are coming up with new stuff and throwing it against the wall and everybody's getting excited about it. And maybe I'm completely off base, but
No, but if I've been spending some time on, I don't know if I should mention the name of Gartner, and reading through some of their material and it's like, man, the acronyms that they throw out there, and it's like, I've only heard of half of these, and it's like, and I got to go look them up, and it's like, oh, well, it just means this. It's just an extension of that. And it's like, oh, okay. Like more things for us to throw around during meetings where, we can massively confuse people. So
keep it simple.
Or sound impressive, right?
Yeah, or sound impressive. Yeah, exactly.
Because I know all these acronyms. What do they mean? I don't know, but I know the acronym.
Yeah.
Something else you mentioned in your book is this idea of decentralized application security. What does that mean?
So, I mean, we know this in this space in application security that we can never hire enough people. The way I describe it is my team could be 4 times the size it is today, and I still won't have enough people. And it's only going to get worse over time, as engineering functions expand and grow, and as new things come in, just not going to be able to hire enough people to do the work that needs to be done. So, how do you manage that? And I think one of the ways to think about it is to decentralize your application security function. And this isn't a new concept. I think when we look at things like whether you call them champions or evangelists or, there's tons of different words for it, but basically being able to deputize people in the engineering space to be security experts. And that's generally what most organizations will do as an initial step is like, okay, well, let's build a champions program and have individuals within the engineering teams and development teams that are responsible for ensuring that security is in place. I think if we take that a step further and say, okay, well, some of these things that we do, can we make them into services that can be called by the development teams in their CI/CD? For instance, can we create fuzz testing that is developed by the application security team that follows the standards and guidelines that are set forth by the application security team that align with the organizational goals, and turn that into an API that can be called during the CI/CD or turn it into a runner or some type of job that can be called during the CI/CD that can then provide a test. And therefore your AppSec team doesn't need to have a ticket open to them to say, fuzz testing may not be a great example because a developer can go do that on their own, but let's say an automated penetration test or something like that. Those services, I think we can create APIs or services of those tasks, and that allows you to, again, push the work to the development teams to be able to call those, integrate them into their pipeline, get the results as early as possible, remediate, and rinse, repeat. And the AppSec team can then focus on maybe the bigger ticket items, doing things like threat models, risk assessments, doing the design and architecture reviews, building security requirements, those types of tasks that require a little bit more thought power as opposed to doing the manual stuff. Again, like engineering teams, development teams, they hate manual work, right? Anything that requires manual, repetitive motion are going to get automated at some point. And I think application security teams should take the similar approach.
And so you also, you kind of mentioned this a little bit in that explanation, but in the book I saw you referred to application security as a service. And so you use this term enablement instead of gates. And so I want to unpack that a little bit. What do you mean when you say enablement instead of gates?
Yeah, we have other words for that, whether it's paved road or golden road or guardrails, but where we should be striving as a industry, as an application security industry, is that we should be providing the enablement in the sense that developers shouldn't be worried that their code is going out with vulnerabilities. They should be worried that their code is going out to deliver the features that the client wants. And so it's up to us to ensure that that roadway, that roadway to production is built in such a way that they understand what vulnerabilities may be impacting the code that they wrote, that they're able to remediate that as soon as possible before it goes out into production. So I think, the way I look at this is the same way that developers run unit tests, regression tests. Like those things are, we shouldn't really distinguish security tests from, regression testing. In fact, security tests should be part of regression testing. And same thing with building abuse case, misuse cases as unit tests that can be run, in the development environment. And all those, methods come together to be able to provide the developer the reaching for a word here, but the assurance that they're going to be able to get that out into production without worrying about the security of it. We don't necessarily want, we want the developers to be aware of security and have a security mindset, but we don't want them to be spending their time doing, security vulnerability remediation, right? That's not where they want to spend their time. That's not where the business wants them to spend their time. They want them to spend their time, delivering value. It's on us to make sure that roadway is clear.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful to get that kind of philosophical understanding, because once again, we're trying to help people that are building programs, and a lot of these folks are going to be relatively new to building programs. And so it's important for them to understand the philosophies that you've experienced over time, and then you've been able to quantify those in the book so that new people can take those philosophies, and maybe they don't understand all of the details about how we got there in the beginning, but it's principles that they can apply to their programs to be successful.
Yeah, and just one little extra color there is that we as a security in general is seen as no, and maybe not so much anymore, but that was definitely the feeling 5-10 years ago, was that we were the people that would come in and spoil everyone's party. And I think that is not, I kind of go back to saying what I said earlier about risk, right? Our job is to limit the risk. If we can eliminate it, great. We're not going to get there. There's always going to be a risk when, software goes out the door. Our job is to try to identify and assign and ensure that we reduce that risk as much as possible. And that's the same mindset when we have enablement versus gates. So instead of saying you can't go out the door with any risk, that's just not possible, right? And that's gonna just bog the system down. Whereas saying, look, here's how we manage the risk, here's how we're going to reduce the risk. You can still deploy, but we need to make sure that we have the risk quantified and properly assigned and controls in place.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to have that perspective. Like, it's easy for us as AppSec people to say, well, you're just going to fix everything,
right?
But that's like, one of the earliest things you said when you were talking about the goal of AppSec programs, it's really to enable the business.
Right.
And that's the part that I see a lot of technologists, they can almost never make that leap into understanding. And I think the only reason that I have a deeper appreciation for that is, starting a startup and running a business through the whole thing, where you start to see things, well, wait, there's a business side to this problem. It's not just about the beauty or the excellence of technical fixes or issues or architectures. Right. I have to measure that against or weigh that against the business and say, sometimes I just have to say, I'm going to have to accept that risk for a period of time, right? Because I got to run the business. Right. And that's that can be a struggle for technologists who
Right.
don't ever gain that appreciation.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to go first with a key takeaway here, and so I'm going to take the one that Derek might share, but that'll give him room to do another one because I'm a fan of this book, and the book is Application Security Program Handbook, and this is, as Derek mentioned, it's from Manning Publishing, the folks that put this out, and so my key takeaway to our audience, or my call to action, is get a copy of this book and check it out, read it, and look at, there's a lot of powerful things in here you can absorb and apply to a new program or a program that's been around for a long time. Derek, how about you? What's your key takeaway or call to action for our audience coming out of this conversation?
Yeah, I always come back to, like I said earlier, I don't think that we can ever have enough application security personnel out there. It's not possible for us to do. So I think, my kind of goal and what I've been doing over the past several years is just trying to evangelize as much as possible around security and make sure that people are aware of just basic risk. And I think we do this on a daily basis, not even in the technology space, but we do this as humans. We identify risk and we understand what our risk is, and I think those types of activities, just it's a matter of trying to share that information and share that knowledge with as many people as possible. And I think that's something that as AppSec professionals and as security professionals, it's on us to make sure that we are trying to bring that to as many people as possible. Definitely.
Well, Derek, thank you for sharing your experiences and telling us about the book. And it's been excellent just to gain some more knowledge and understanding about where you're coming from as you're writing this, and maybe we'll encourage some other people to write books coming out of this too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Derek,
more the merrier, and the more we can share, the better. So
definitely. Thanks, Derek.
All right, thank you.